we'll start in just a few more minutes. I'm going to excuse myself for 1 second. Okay, well, I think we're going to get going. We're going to, a couple of minutes early, but I think we'll get going. So I think, Joe, you were one of the ones that, oh, actually, you know what? Before I forget, because last week I forgot, can I have a volunteer for an opening prayer? Would anybody like to do that for us, please?
I could, I guess.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Grateful that we're able to come together and learn more about business law, even despite the distances and other times and locations. We pray for thy Spirit to be with us. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you. You know, I'll have to tell you something kind of funny. It was, I think, a couple semesters ago, we had a online group meeting, and so we had the opening prayer, and nobody could hear anything. And it was kind of funny because these eyes kept coming up to see if the prayer was over with yet. And so, and the prayer kept going on and on and on. It was a very, very beautiful and very sincere prayer, but it was kind of funny because nobody could figure out when it was over. And it went on and on. But anyway. So before I open it up for a couple questions, I want to just address something. Last week, I talked about legal writing. Okay, and I put a lot of emphasis on this, and this question is probably a good example with legal writing. So the questions that you submit as a group, I don't necessarily alter them, and those are what transfer into your review quizzes. Okay, so those questions that you're creating are going to your fellow peers in the form of an exam, a quiz. And so I had quite a few questions come back about this particular question, and I decided to leave it on there and then talk about it today. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I think all of you probably recognized some of the challenges that go with writing that is not clear and concise, where the question is not clear, and allows a very pointed and direct question. I mean, some questions are red herrings and they're purposely a little bit gray to make you think. But if we don't have our writing clear and concise and our question is the same, we're gonna struggle with our answers. So I just put this up there. I don't want to go over it, dig into it in too much detail, because I think you all recognize that we had some issues. There were some issues with some other questions. So I just encourage you, as you're writing, read it out loud. Read your writing out loud. Read it to somebody else. See if they have any concerns. See if they can figure it out. Okay, does that make sense? Does anybody want to, do you have any questions or have anything that you would like to contribute or make a comment about? No? Okay. So as we go through this next this next set of sessions, quiz questions and answers, just be sure that you pay attention to that, okay? Okay. All right, so we're going to dive into contracts. How many of you been reading about contracts this week? Everybody, I hope.
A little bit.
Okay.
Not as much as I
So
should
I
have.
want to give, I'm sorry, Joe.
Not as much as I should have.
So contracts in law school, contracts class is pretty lengthy. And so what we're going to go through tonight is at a fairly high level and generalized, okay? So if you have questions, you know, feel free to ask, but realize there's a lot of what ifs in these, all right? At some point, you're going to have an opportunity to create a contract for the sale of goods, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but this is in general, okay? So kind of just an overview. It's a promise. It's a set of promises for, oh, what did I write that? Is a promise or a set of promises for the breach of which law? Oh, okay. So if it's a bunch of promises that we are a promise or a set of promises that if we do not follow through, the law gives us a remedy or a performance of which the law in some way will recognize as a duty. So the agreement creates rights and obligations that generally can be enforced in courts. And so what we're going to talk about is offer a little bit on acceptance, consideration, duties, enforcement, and defenses, and then a little bit on capacity, writing, required and valid contract. One point that I wanted to make, so I posted in the Google community, and I think I did it on the announcements page, a set of topics that you could choose. So hopefully next week I'll do the same thing because I'd like a lot more participation by each one of you. So, you know, I encourage you to do that. I'm not asking you to do a lot, but like this week, what I asked, and it'll be the same for next week, just a different set of topics, is just to pick a topic. And this would be the same thing that we would go through in an actual on-ground law class, where typically we would brief a case. So we're given a case to brief. But what I'm asking you to do is pick that topic. Just present to us a very brief overview of what that is. And then if you can reference a case so that we can have an example of what can be an issue with that topic. So we've got a couple folks that signed up, so we'll go through those tonight. But next week, I hope that everybody or all of the topics will be picked up. So contracts, you know, they're important to business. Would you agree? Any thoughts on why contracts are important in business?
Yes, they're very important.
Right.
The part of the reason why they're so important is in order to make a profit, you need to know when you're going to be getting paid. You need to know when you're going to be selling things. And so contracts help ensure that you get your raw materials to production in time and make sure that your production employees know what they're going to be getting paid and when they're expected to be there. And it really kind of makes it's like a lubrication to help the economy move. Without them, there'd just be a lot of chaos because people would be doing whatever they wanted and there'd be no repercussions. And yeah, it would be bad without them.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, thank you, Joe. That's well said. And take that you know, overview of what Joe shared with us as you go forward with your contract that you're going to create for the sale of goods. All right, and think about those points that he was talking about and how you're going to relate that that transaction and create action from that. Okay. Again, like we could talk about statute of limitations, statute of fraud. That could be a whole hour unto itself. So if there's some terms that pop up here, I encourage you to take those back to your learning and look them up and apply them, into your learning for that week. Yeah, did you have a question, Joe, or a comment? Anybody?
I'm good.
Okay. So feel free. If anybody wants to jump in with anything, don't hesitate. Okay, and like Joe said, without enforceable contracts, commerce would collapse. All right? As much as we would like to think that everybody is wholesome in their activities, unfortunately, that's not true. In fact, I'm going to bring up this point. Somebody posted a comment about how do we pick between moral, what was the question? How do we pick out, how do we make a choice between a moral obligation and the law? So something that I would like to reference, let's think of Robin Hood. Okay, did Robin Hood do good things? I mean, he would go rob from the rich who really, in essence, were stealing from the poor and then giving back to the poor. But the law of the land was they were taxed. Was it morally correct? Probably not in our sense, how we would look at things, but it was a law. Okay, so we have to make sure that we pay attention to what the law says. All right, because we do not have common morals all the time. How many of you are familiar with the case Roe versus Wade?
Somewhat familiar.
No.
So this is about a topic that's very sensitive to us that don't believe in abortion, right? We value and treasure life. This is a very divine gift from our Father in heaven. And Roe versus Wade was one of the first cases that we studied in law school, and it was about, the case was studied to tell us to divorce ourselves from our thoughts on what we thought was right or wrong. We had to get in sync with what the law said, and we had to brief this case as the law would brief it and what the law was saying. So how were we going to interpret the law as it relates to Roe versus Wade, which was about the rights of a woman to terminate her pregnancy? And to me, that thought was like, oh my gosh, that's horrid. But so we have to think about those things. What's the law? What's the rule? Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So to answer the question, Robin Hood steals from the rich. Is that morally right? Could be.
Maybe.
Well, I think it's an important distinction. He wasn't actually stealing from the rich. He was stealing from the tax collectors.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
So he was
from the
directly
government.
stealing from the government, which he felt the government had been stealing from the people. So
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So he was still violating the law.
most definitely.
Yeah. So we have to remember that. Okay. All right. So there's two classes of contracts. There's contracts by deed, which, you guys probably, if you bought a home, know that would be a contract by deed. Simple contracts are really informal contracts, and they're made in any way in writing, orally, or they may be implied from conduct. So you'll you'll be creating a simple contract, because in a contract for sale of goods, from a UCC perspective, because you're not transferring any kind of deed or legal conveyance of a property. So we've got, so I don't think anybody signed up. Where's my list? No. So nobody signed up for bilateral. These two were on the list, bilateral contract and unilateral contract. Does anybody have any questions on these? Sometimes these can be confusing, but I've given you a couple of examples. So a bilateral contract is a buyer promises to pay the price, the seller promises to deliver the goods. Versus a unilateral contract is X promises to reward anyone who will find his lost wallet and binds himself to the promise, but no one is bound to search for the wallet. But if somebody finds the wallet and saw the offer and returns it, he is entitled to the reward. Make sense?
What if the person doesn't know about the offer? Like, he just brings the wallet to the person, but he doesn't know he has the reward on it.
So if somebody found the wallet and returned it?
Yeah, but without knowing that it's a reward coming for me.
So let's just say I find the wallet and I have not seen the offer.
Yes.
And I'm the next door neighbor and I find it in the backyard and I walk over and knock on the door and I give it to him. I said, hey, here's your wallet. I found it in the backyard. No, he is not obligated to pay me.
Okay.
That's why having seen the offer. Okay?
Yeah, makes sense. I was just wondering. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, let's see, I think, Brett, you had implied contracts. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Okay. So the implied contracts, from what I understood, was the kind of nonverbal or non-written communications or agreements between people. Like, I found a little case that talked about a guy who went to a TV station and gave him an idea for a program, but they didn't accept it. So then, like 3 or 4 years down the road, they used that same kind of idea, and then he sued him for kind of like an implied contract, even though they didn't have a specific agreement that they would pay him. But it was kind of implied that for his idea, they would pay him something when they were talking about it initially.
Good. You know, that's a good intro. There, there was a case, it just brought to mind, I don't know if I want to share this with you because I'm not sure if I can tell it right. It's been a long time. There was, oh, I'm not, because I'll mess it all up. I'll have to see if I can find it, because there was something along those lines that was, you'll get a kick out of it. If I can remember it, I'll bring it up. So just to elaborate on this a little bit, so implied in law is an obligation created for the sake of justice or to avoid any unjust enrichment. So I give you an example here. You know, we've got a patron at a restaurant and he chokes on the bite of an apple. The doctor is seated next door and he rushes over and he saves his life. He later sends a bill for services rendered to the patron he saves. The customer is obligated to pay the doctor, even though he did not have any intention to choke or use the services of the doctor. So even though there's nothing in writing, the law will infer that there is a remedy due. Remedy meaning pay the bill. Okay? Implied in fact is based on the facts of the situation. Oh, also I want to point out on an implied in law, you'll also hear the term quasi-contract or constructive contract, same thing. Implied in fact, this creates an obligation based on the facts of the situation. So your neighbor hires you to mow his lawn. Every Friday for the summer, you mow each Saturday morning for 3 weeks, and you get paid on Saturday morning. The fourth time you mow on Friday morning. Okay, so he hires you to mow his lawn every Friday for the entire summer, but you mow it on Saturday. But you get paid Saturday morning. The fourth time you mow on Friday morning, you arrive Saturday morning for payment, and your neighbor refuses to pay you. So even though nothing is in writing, the law will infer that there is a contract and he is obligated to pay. So even though you can have some different things going on, like he says, okay, you got to mow on Friday, but you show up on Saturday and he still pays you, it's an implied in fact. So based on the facts of the situation. Okay? And I believe you will see some of these questions on the test. So a couple different types of contract law. You have private law, which willing parties can agree to do almost anything. And then you have the UCC. Now the UCC is a uniform set of laws for commercial activities. So when we look at the rule, we have to make sure that we first start with the type of contract. So if it's a contract for commercial activities, we have to go to the UCC, or the Uniform Commercial Code. And it really does facilitate the ease of doing business. But that's where you have to first look at the law, and then you start dialing into other statutes and case law, and even case law. So you will be using the UCC when you do your sale of goods contract. And the sale of goods contract is actually kind of fun because it really gives you tangible experience on what a contract looks like. So how many of you are in procurement, supply chain management? Oh, okay, Susan, so you are. Do you review contracts?
Actually, yeah, we do invitations for bid, we do qualifications, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we do contracts once they come back.
Are you using the UCC? Can you elaborate a little bit? Can you give us some examples?
Let's see, examples. We use mostly the USFR, but we do contracts through that.
You want to explain what that is?
I can't remember the acronym for it, but it's a set of regulations for like schools, which I work at a school district.
Oh,
so
okay.
the rules and regulations that we've got to follow for that.
So government.
It's government.
Yeah.
So that's what we use, and it's kind of like that, only it's our set of rules that we have to follow.
Right.
And yeah, invitation for bid. There's a whole lot of rules we got to follow. A whole lot of things we can do, a whole lot of things we can't do.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, you'll be able to offer some other insight into that as well. So, you might take a look at some of those things that are applicable to the UCC, because even though you guys, I'm in government as well, and even though you go out for bid for those contracts, you're still going to follow UCC, and then of course all the restrictions that the government puts around itself.
Just more restrictions.
Yeah. All right, so this is just a process mapping for contracts. And it's just something you can kind of fall back on. Offer, if there's an offer, yes, we go to acceptance. Acceptance, yes, we go to consideration, yes. If we don't have offer and acceptance and consideration, we do not have a contract. Okay, and so some of the other pieces here that we want to look at, we will look at defenses. So if we're in there trying to either defend our contract, why it's valid, or we're saying, no, this is not a valid contract, we've got these defenses. And so some of the defenses are capacity, illegality, is it a mistake, misrepresentation, was it fraud, duress, undue influence. So there's some things that we want to look at that we can use as defenses. Okay. Okay, Elvis.
Oh yeah. So,
So do
I
you want
was
to
like,
talk about some offer?
yeah. So I'm just I tried to brief it out what I understood from my reading, and so pretty much an offer is a promise or a commitment to perform something, or in the other case to refrain of doing something. And so it requires an offerer, like, sorry my pronunciation, an offer, and an offeree. So the offeree is the person who receives the offer, and the offerer is the person who extends the offer to the offeree. And it has to be, it must be something specific and serious. So an object, an intention to do something, it need to be in the terms of understood from both parts, but in terms of like reasonable, and so the both can be certain to the terms of the contract, and the offer need to be communicated to the offeree. And pretty much, most of the given a daily life example, most of these offers are done online our times now. Like most of those are done online, so it means that usually when you go, let's say eBay, you're gonna sell your iPhone or someone is selling their iPhone, and they accept offers. And in the moment you make an offer and the person on the other side accepted offers, that becomes a legal binding contract. Or on a, as you mentioned, bidding, some of these online sites, they have the highest bid wins the item, and he accepts his credit card to be charged on that amount that is the highest bidding.
Good. So let me just this is it's a pretty
Yeah, it was a lot of reading on that one.
okay. So it's offers, there are some things that can be written into an offer, but always remember there is intent.
Yeah.
There is an intent to negotiate, and there is a conclusion to those negotiations. And as a result in those negotiations, there's always to be legal consequences.
Yeah, in the moment when they accept the offer, that's a binding contract at that moment.
Right, right. I want to just really quickly talk about advertisements can be offers, because this was one of the topics that I put up there. I was hoping somebody would talk about it. I'm going to give you just two examples. So let's just say you've got an advertised computer scanner or some computer equipment specifying the make and the model, and it says it's for sale for $780, okay?
Yes.
The ad is not an offer because there's no language of promise or commitment to any definable person. So it's got to be something that can be defined, all right? And there's no definable quantity, which quantity and a definable person is part of a requirement for a contract. But if you've got a newspaper ad that says one black mink coat, worth $2,000, I'm selling it for $100, first come, first serve. This is an offer because the ad does contain language of commitment to an identifiable person. First come, first serve. Okay. And it also says one. There's one quantity. But as opposed to, computer equipment
Yeah, I was going to
for
say even like,
$80.
sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say they need to have some, what's it last week, the implied work of fitness, meaning that this person is sell this as used, as new, or as it is. Like,
Correct. Right. Mm-hmm.
so
So
that was most of the things that happen online nowadays. For that, I'm just trying to focus something on online offers. And if you go to this website, everything is like an offer with every detail and everything.
Yes, and there is very specific contract law applied to online
Yeah.
type of offerings. So as we become much more technology driven, that area of expertise or definition really does scale down and detail out. Okay, so we go to, I wanted to also talk about death of an offer. So let's jump down to literal death of an offer. You have the offeree dies, or the destruction of the subject matter. So let's say we are offering a house for sale, and I made an offer on the house and it burns down. So the destruction of the subject matter, it is done. That offer is now dead. So then we have figurative death of an offer, natural causes, which is a lapse of time. So when you're structuring your contract, it should have a very specific time. Okay, so this offer begins on May 1 and concludes on April 30th, a year later, 2017. Suicide, murder, that's pretty self-explanatory. Revocation, execution by operation of law, change in law terminates the offer as well. Execution is like death. So acceptance. So it's a meeting of the minds. That's what acceptance is. We achieve consensus ad item. So once an offer has been made, the other party can accept the offer in any reasonable way, including starting performance. When I was going to law school, fax machines were like heavy in use. So there was a lot of understanding and learning about, an offer and when the fax is sent, if it gets stuck in the fax machine. So I'm not even going to go into it, but acceptance again can be its own beast too. But the bottom line, and this is what you need to know, that once an offer has been made, the other party can accept the offer. So, when you create your contract for your goods that you're going to sell, you will sign and present to the party that's agreeing, and they sign, and that is an agreement. Okay. Now the party who accepts can back out up until performance begins. Now performance can begin the minute the contract is signed, because you might have an order in the system for something and it's ready to ship. So performance, you can define when performance begins. Okay, so make sure you understand that. Sometimes I think you'll read in some contracts where, for instance, in a house, I don't know how many of you have sold a house, but when you sign an offer for a home, so it's conditioned upon certain factors. And if those factors aren't met, then the individual has time to rescind the offer. So let's say they put a condition in based on satisfaction of an inspection. And so they'll list the things on the inspection, and if the buyer doesn't like it, they can rescind the offer and get out of it. So a contract must include a promise and a return promise. It cannot go one direction. And they have to get something valuable. They have to get a good or a service, a goods or a service. A promise of a gift is not enforceable because one party gets nothing. Okay. And there's cases out there of a promise of a gift and somebody trying to enforce that, but they didn't get it. And remember this, the exchange does not have to be equal, okay? So you can sell your old jalopy in the backyard that doesn't run and isn't worth anything. It's totally rusted out.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was like, let's say if I make an offer to sell something or to rent a house to someone, and I don't like that person, can I back off of my offer?
Just because you don't like the person?
Well,
No,
like,
if you made the offer, no, you can't rescind the offer. Once you've made the offer, okay, so when you make an offer, you will normally have a period of time for the other individual to accept the offer. And remember, you're in a negotiation. So you don't say, okay, I'm going to put this offer, but now I don't like you, so now I'm going to rescind the offer.
yeah, no, I've seen this mostly in renting because I don't have a lot of rent, and most of the times when you look for a renting place, they just say, well, like, you have what you need, but then they go look something else, like, look, I found someone else, and I was just thinking, does this cause be legal? I can back out my offer because I don't want to rent you my house.
So does anybody want to jump in and make a comment here?
So you're saying it's.
Go ahead.
So let's say you put online, like on Craigslist or whatever, you say, I have this house to rent. And I call you and say, look, I want to rent your house at your price, and I have the requirements you asked. So I come meet you in person, and you say, well, guess what? I changed my mind.
Well, if it was just simply an advertisement like that, I don't think it's necessarily an offer unless you put in your ad the first person to have these qualifications will be rented the house. Then it would be considered to be an offer. Otherwise, it's just an advertisement if it's just on Craigslist.
That's correct. Thank you. That's where we're going. So we have an advertisement versus an offer. Now, an advertisement can be an offer, but if you are meeting the criteria of an offer, it's an offer.
Yes.
Okay. So you can revoke an offer. Okay, you can revoke. There are some laws out there that in the language it will say it's irrevocable unless consideration or the equivalent is given for the promise of irrevocability. So, an offeree can rescind when there's reliable information that potentially the offer, has indicated to a reasonable person that the offerer no longer wishes to make the offer. But it's really got to come from, there's some special rules around revocation of an offer. Now, in renting, I would have to look up the rules on renting because I think there's probably some language around that, and I'm not very familiar with rental agreements.
Like credit score and all those things. So that's a total story.
Sorry?
That's a total story because you need to have a credit score, background check, criminal, like eviction. There are all those things to be checked. But I would
Right, but the question that you asked was if you offer your rental up and you don't like the person just based on something very general and you rescind the offer, there's probably some language within rental agreements, what you can do. And I'm hesitant to say that yes, you can and yes, you can't, because I think there's probably some more detailed language around rental contracts. But if I would say that if you haven't started into anything, you haven't actually agreed upon anything, there's nothing signed, then you can rescind, because you've done nothing but other than discuss and negotiate.
I see.
You know, if you say, okay, somebody calls you up and says, I want to rent my house, this house that you have on the market. Okay, you've got one house, you would like to rent it for this. That does not necessarily mean that those individuals are contracted at that point to rent from you, because there's other conditions that you're going to put in there before they are approved to rent. Correct, Elvis? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if they come to meet you and you decide at that point that you don't want to offer them, you don't offer.
Okay.
Jason, did you have a comment? I can't hear. Okay, is somebody trying to make a comment?
Might sounds like background noise, but I have
Okay.
a
Okay.
if I can remember. So basically, what you're saying is when you're negotiating, be vague until you decide you actually want to commit.
Right. Negotiation and offer are two different things. So be careful that you don't get caught into a negotiation and trying to turn that into an offer. Okay, because negotiations are not the same thing as an offer.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And I think that's where Elvis, this is where I'm hearing where you're at.
Yeah, that was my concern. Like sometimes it's hard to. So pretty much, if it's not signed, it's still a negotiation.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so now we have performance. We have substantial performance, doing exactly what is the contract is doing exactly what is in the contract is not always possible, but the parties have to reasonably live up to the terms. And this is sometimes what will be enforced if a party breaches. So if one party does not materially perform, the other party no longer has to perform. All right, so failure to perform is called breach. And so this is basically what we see. So if somebody is not paying the rent in Elvis's situation, that would be a breach of the contract if it states that in the contract. So when you write your contract for your sale of goods, you're going to want to pay attention to that. What is going to be the performance? So in you sell a good, and in return for that good, you have to be paid for that good, those goods. So if this is, I want you to think of a manufacturer and delivering products. So I'm going to purchase from you some product. So our agreement is going to say that you're going to deliver product to me, I'm going to pay you. So you need to think in the terms of what needs to really happen. I have to pay you by a certain amount of time. I have to receive the materials by a certain period of time. And they have to, if you so write into your contract that they're going to be, in good condition for me to resell them or use, that has to be part of it. There's got to be some language in there that talks about what is a breach, what happens that we are going to be able to look at that could, potentially stop this contract. Okay, so damages. The party who is harmed can request money from the other party equal to the loss of the breach. Okay, so if I don't get the goods that I buy from you, we're going to have a breach somewhere along the way. So let's say the goods leave your dock and somehow the guy driving the truck goes off into La La Land and he decides to sell them. So there will be something in our language that talks about how those goods are going to reach me and the condition that they will be in, that they will actually reach me, that they will be delivered to me within a certain amount of time. Okay, so there's a lot of things in a contract that you have to think about that relate to money and performance and damages. So in a sale of goods contract, typically damages will not include specific performance, because if the goods are gone, really the only thing that we'll be able to remedy with is money, okay, or another shipment, right? So if that's a doable thing and we agree to that, if the goods don't arrive in a condition that I can resell them or use them, then potentially we could require that the order be replaced versus a credit to the account.
You know, there was something that happened at my work. We had some shelves that were expected to be delivered, and the boxes and everything were terribly damaged. So because they refused the delivery at that time, we weren't responsible for paying them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. But then there are times too where ownership varies depending on the verbiage of the contract. Sometimes when it leaves the person's dock, it belongs to you, even if it's on the road.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
kind of tricky.
And typically you'll have insurance for that. But that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. So these are just things you need to think about when you're going through your contract, okay? Just kind of walk through that. If you were shipping the product and if you're receiving the product. Again, it doesn't have to be equal, but in the sale of goods from a commercial perspective, each party does have to feel like it's an equal distribution, not only of value of the product to the price, but also that there's not going to be any harm to either person. So thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. That was, I'm glad you brought that up. So defenses, I don't want to go into a lot of this, but you should read up on defenses about certain things that can make contracts void, even though both parties agreed on the terms and there was valuable consideration. So there's unconscionability. If one party tricked another party into agreeing to an unfair contract, the court may not enforce it. I think that there was a case where we had a son took advantage of his mother's estate, told her that he needed to manage the estate, and she gave it to him, and he did. He squandered the money within a very short amount of time. The other siblings got involved. She passes away. He's got control of the estate. And they were able to prove that he tricked her into agreeing to giving her control. That's a type of a contract, okay? It wasn't power of attorney. It was a contract for managing some of her affairs because he was paid for part of it. But it also comes up when businesses try to trick uneducated clients, and this happens. So it's good to understand the the components of a contract. All of you will be involved with contract in some form or fashion throughout your life. Lying or misrepresenting something in negotiations can make a contract void. You know, you can see this in sale of a home. If you ever sell a home, you go through these lists of questions about the home. So, you know, is there anything that you as a homeowner are aware of that, you know, is wrong with the home? And if you intentionally misrepresent what the home would be about, so let's just say it's got mold, and you say, I don't know anything about it, and yet you do, that can void that contract. Fraud, duress, just look at all of those. Capacity. Capacity is a good one because that can involve a minor. It can involve the situation with the little old lady that I talked about. That case, that was a capacity. And that was actually duress with that case as well. It happens with individuals that have, you know, disabilities. So, and legality. So just read up on those and know what those are about. They're not, you know, crazy, but there's a lot of cases out there with those types of situations. So void contracts. Now you'll read some language in some contracts where it has joint severability, meaning if one part of the contract is void, that's okay. The rest of the contract will continue. Okay, so it'll continue to operate as a valid contract unless, but some parts of it can be void. So look up, read about enforceability. Those are some key areas in a couple of the quizzes that will be, oh, I did add this. So just a couple of, these are true or false. So a contract can only be formed in writing. Is this true or false?
False.
Correct. You can have verbal contracts. So are words necessary to create a contract? Think of our lawn mowing example. The question is, words are necessary. Statement is, words are necessary to create a contract. True or false?
True.
Try again. It's false. To create a contract. So it's not. They're not necessary to create the contract. Okay. We had an agreement by performance only. Okay, so I came over and mowed your lawn. You paid me. We didn't even, really negotiate anything. I saw your lawn was long and I came over and mowed it and you paid me some money, and I came back the next week and I mowed it and you paid me some more money, and I came back another week and I mowed it, paid me some money. I came back the fourth week and you said, no, I don't want to pay you. And yeah, you do owe me. You paid me the last 3 weeks. So that is performance.
So with the situation where the person's coming and mowing the lawn, if on the first week the person comes out and says, I didn't want my lawn mowed,
correct,
would there have been a contract?
Correct. Now, one could say, okay, wait a minute.
I'm going to sue you.
This could be implied in fact. Okay, but there was there was nobody out in the yard complaining about, the lawn. The guy next door just didn't like the long grass, so he came over and mowed it. Did it maybe make his lawn look better? Yes, but he wasn't necessarily enriched by it. So he would not be obligated to pay for that lawn mowing at all.
But if he paid him the one time, would he be required to pay him on any future times that he chose to mow the lawn?
Well, if he came back the second time and he mowed it, and the guy says, look, I don't want you to be mowing my lawn. You could potentially have a case for, okay, I mowed it last week, you paid me. I mowed it this week, you don't want me to mow, I won't, but you do owe me for today. So most likely they would, the court would find in favor that he would have to pay him, but going forward, no.
But question is, like, what about the amount of payment? If I give you $50 yesterday, you come today, I can give you $10 or $1.
Well, the fact that you did it the first time and there were no words.
The same amount?
Well, you can argue that, okay, I paid you $50, you came this week, and that $50 was for the next 4 weeks. I think you're probably going to have some, that's going to be a tough one to probably resolve. It's kind of a simplified situation.
Yeah, so this doesn't happen in real life anyway. But.
Yeah, you're throwing a lot of pieces in there that if the neighbor, so let's say I come back and I mow the next week, you paid me $50 the first week and nothing was said, I just took the money and I came back and you came out and said, look, I'm not going to pay you $50 every week. If he's communicated that to me and I've already mowed the lawn, then probably you're not going to be required to pay the $50 for that week because he's telling you right then and there, and I came and mowed the lawn without his agreement, although he paid me last week and I mowed the lawn. But already we've got a breakdown in negotiations just by this conversation that's going on, that I came back, I mowed the lawn, and he comes out and he says, no, now, because he came out after the lawn was mowed, very likely he had created the commitment to pay me the $50. Now, what you might find is the court would look at what the reasonable lawn mowing contract is paying for that time and say, okay, you paid $50, right now everybody's only getting $20 per lawn, so we're going to say that your lawn is worth $20, or maybe your lawn's not that big, whatever, you're going to have to pay $20, and so now you are obligated to mow his lawn, 4 1/4 more times. So there's some other factors that are going to play into that. Have you started to create a contract? Yes, by performance. But we're also.
I think they should put the. No, I think you should put a no trespassing sign there, and so everything is all set.
Okay, but let's take this back to what we said. We said, okay, I paid you $50. Now you come back and you mow again. Am I going to pay you another $50? All right, so now we're going to have to look at what has happened, and that's why I say, what the guy comes out and says, no, I don't want to pay, or he comes out and says, yes, I want to pay you, but don't pay me, don't mow anymore. So he pays him. Is he obligated to pay the $50? Could, or maybe not. If we do take this to a point where we've got to take it to someone to adjudicate it, very possibly he's going to come back and say, what would the reasonable person do? What is the reasonable going rate for mowing lawns in this area for that? It's kind of, he kind of takes a mediation perspective. That's how the court would start to look at that. All right, but the bottom line is, if you're going to create it for $50 and you come back and you mow it and the guy comes out and gives you $50, you know, or maybe he only gives you $25, you know, that's what you've done. You have created the contract for some sort of consideration.
Good to know this.
Well, I don't know if there's good to know, but there's a lot of gray areas in law, and so there's a lot of what ifs, and then there's a lot of but fors.
Well,
so you'll hear that a lot in laws, but for this, but for this, but for this. So
I mean, this is the same example. If I walk into a restaurant, I see they don't have staff, so I go help them, and just go to the manager. Now you owe me money because I helped you.
right, and that's why I was talking about enrichment. So this individual was enriched by his life. He was, you know, saved his life. You can also take that to turn that into tort law as well. There is a duty of care owed by doctors to assist. Okay. However, the courts also recognize that that individual was his life saved, he was enriched, and if that guy sends him a bill for that, you know, that office call right there, whatever you want to call it, they're going to support his request for payment. They're going to say, yes, you know, you are eligible for that payment, for that remedy. So in the sense of the lawnmower guy, he has created a contract. Usually it takes more than one or two. So, I mean, and sometimes they'll be, that's why I said when you come back to it with a reasonable person, you know, he pays him $50. Okay, the lawn was long and it was probably hard to mow. So he comes back, and is he going to pay him another $50? No, I don't want to pay him $50. I don't want to keep doing that. But wait a minute, you did it that time for me. Why aren't you going to pay me $50? I already mowed it. I thought you were going to pay me $50. He said, no, I'm not going to pay you $50 every time you mow my lawn. And so what's the guy going to do? Get mad and leave and then try to sue him for the $50? Okay, so now he does. So now we go to the court, and, you know, we've got one time that the lawn was mowed for $50. So was the guy that owned the property enriched by that lawn mowing? Yes, and he also paid for that. He paid $50 for it. So now he comes back and he says, I'm only going to pay you $25. And that guy doesn't like it, so now he's going to go take him to the court. So now the court will come back and he says, what would the reasonable person do in this situation? And so they would probably go to look at what was being done in the neighborhood. They're going to look at what the reasonable people are paying for that. Okay, so quasi-contracts are also called implied in law contracts. Yes, they are. Rejections must be communicated. Communicated. This is true. Okay, I didn't spell that, sorry. I wanted to put some more questions on there, but I didn't have time. Yeah, so rejections must be communicated to become effective. What questions can I answer for anybody? We are at the end of our office hour and need to conclude, so I don't hold you here forever. Let me just ask a couple more questions. I had some that I wanted to include and I didn't get them on there. So I want to pick a couple that I think are relevant to what you're going to be doing. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one, and I don't expect you to know it, but under the UCC, so this is a Uniform Commercial Code, a contract may be modified with or without new consideration. So what did I just ask you?
You asked if a contract could be changed without changing the consideration that's being offered by one party or the other.
That is correct. The original consideration. Right. So is this true or false? What do you think?
I would say it's true if both parties consent to it.
Yes, that's right. That is correct. So under UCC, there is no need for more consideration if both parties consent, but under common law, consideration is required. So remember that UCC is our binding code here, but under common law, which is really what's going to govern private contracts, new consideration is required. So here is a good example of that. You have an employment agreement, and this is a really good example because it has happened. When you're employed by a company and they ask you to sign a non-compete agreement, your consideration for that non-compete is typically your salary, meaning you're brand new to the company. So, you know, Mr. Smith, we are offering you an employment agreement. We're going to pay you $50,000 a year, and in return for that, we're going to ask you to sign a non-compete, probably a non-disclosure agreement, because you're a salesperson. We're going to ask you to sign a non-compete. Okay, that's all they need to offer is that salary. But let's say they forgot to ask you to sign a non-compete. 6 months down the road, we've got a problem. We've got a competitor that's poaching our employees. And we did not have our sales guy sign a non-compete. And so now we decide that we're going to ask him to sign a non-compete. The only way that we can legally ask him to sign that non-compete is by giving him some consideration. Consideration could be in the form of a week's worth of vacation. It could be in the form of a week's worth of pay. But we have got to give him something that is worth that that non-compete agreement. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it can't be like $10. It's got to be probably more along the equal to a week's worth of salary, maybe even a month's worth of salary or a vacation or something like that. Okay. Let's see.
So pretty much, if the employee comes to me and says, sign this non-compete, I should say, what should I get back, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the U.S., where do you live?
Right now I live in Massachusetts. So, yes.
You live where? Yeah, I think it's internet. I don't know. I don't want to. I know that I've got some international students, so I want to make sure that I don't put everybody into the same bucket. Domestically, that's a pretty common practice and agreement. Let's see. The offeror is free to revoke the offer at any time prior to a proper acceptance. True or false? The offeror is free to revoke the offer at any time prior to a proper acceptance. We talked about this quite a bit. Yes, because we're negotiating, right? So that's where negotiations are in place. Okay, make sense? Okay.
So on that where they can revoke, if there was some language that they put in with the offer saying like, you have this offer of employment, you have 24 hours to accept, they would have to wait the full 24 hours before they could revoke that offer. Is that correct? Or would they be able to revoke it 12 hours later if the person hadn't accepted yet?
That is correct. That is correct. They can revoke it until it's accepted. And I mean, and we've done that before. You know, we've, in the middle of an offer, we've rescinded the offer, you know, for a number of reasons based on maybe something we found or now. So in employment law, which is a little bit different. So typically in employment law offers, you will write this type of language. This offer is predicated on the satisfactory meeting some satisfactory. We're going to base it on you know, some things that we're going to put on in there that must be met even if the offer has been accepted. So for instance, we're going to put in there that the employee, say he has to pass a background verification, the satisfactory to our standards. They're going to have to pass a verification of credentials, background. If they filled out an application and they said, to my best of my knowledge, this is true, we're going to verify the details on it, or a drug screen. And so even though they've accepted the offer, so let me clarify this. An offer of employment is not a contract. Okay, an employment agreement is not the same as a contract unless it is written as contractual language. Okay, and so in the United States, we have what's called at-will employment. So every offer letter should have language in there that's at will. This offer is not to be construed as a contract. If it's a contract, it means that, you know, the employer is beholden to the employee for a specific period of time unless it, you know, runs its course or there's some sort of breach that occurs. But that's going to be very detailed in that contract, just like it would be for a sale of goods. But it's not governed by UCC. But employment agreements are not the same as contracts because they are not, number one, there's no specific time in an employment agreement. And there's the, you know, the earnings are usually by an hourly earning, or they should always either be an hourly earning or a pay period earning, and you can annualize it out, but you don't ever want to say, okay, we're going to pay you $75,000 a year. That's an incorrect way to write out an offer letter. But so don't get confused with employment offer letters are not that you think are contracts, because those are not contracts. They can be incorrectly created as a contract, but that don't get confused that employee offer letters are contracts, because they're not. But to answer your original question, you can rescind an offer of employment prior to acceptance. And you can also rescind it after it's been accepted based on some points that you've written into the offer letter. And I can show you an example of an offer letter maybe next week, so you have an idea of those points that should be in there. Okay? So any questions this week? We've kind of run a little bit over, so I don't want to hold anybody up, but any questions?
No questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about the exam. We're supposed to be able to go back and review that, correct?
Review the exam, you mean the practice exam?
I
Well,
think she meant was appealing. You could appeal for.
Oh,
Yeah.
appeal the exam.
I think we have to wait till the exam closes tonight at midnight before you can
But
start
we
looking at it to appeal it.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
is that tonight?
It says it opens tonight at 10:59 p.m.
The appeal, let me go check that. Let me stop sharing. Does it close tonight?
I think what he said is right. I thought it closed last night, but I was probably incorrect.
Yeah, the exam closes tonight at 11:59 p.m. and the appeal opens at 11:59 p.m. So we have to wait till the exam is you can no longer be taking it before you can look at the exam and see what the answers were.
Okay, thanks, Joe. You know, and I'm going to make a quick comment. Has become very is really strict on due dates. I used to have a lot of flexibility to work with students, and which I was. For one reason or another, they would have you know, a problem getting their meet their due dates. I don't have that flexibility now, so I really encourage you to push to get your assignments in on time. I've worked with a couple of students to help them had some specific situations where they needed some extra time based on a family, you know, tragedy or whatever, or illness. And so I have to go to school now if I want to open some things to repost. So just be careful. You do get a mulligan on the case brief, but again, that takes a little bit of doing for me to get in there and open it. So just be aware of that. So yeah. Any other questions that I can help with, or comments or concerns?
I have one last question. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I may have misunderstood the case brief assignment. Were we supposed to brief the case that was listed in like the Bette Midler case or what have you? Were we supposed to brief that, or we were supposed to go get our own?
No, I think it was the Midler case. Bette Midler case? Yeah, that's the one you were supposed to brief.
Okay. That's what, and is that how it's going to be every week, or?
Let's see, are you briefing a case? See, this is part, they changed the syllabus on me, so I get asked these questions and I gotta go look them up.
I believe we're briefing the case on the commercial with the Harrier jet this week.
Oh, the Pepsi points.
Yes.
Oh, that
So
was,
we do brief that.
that's a
That's
cool
this
one.
week's
Okay.
brief.
Okay, so it looks like we've got, oh wow, you guys, okay, we're doing quite a bit of briefing this time. So it looks like we've got case briefs going forward every week. Yeah. That's really cool because, you know, I was actually a real advocate for this because you learn so much in briefing cases, and you really get to exercise the opportunity to write legally and from a legal perspective, and really get you into understanding the facts of the case and issue, and how you relate the ruling to the issue, which is sometimes a real disconnect for a lot of folks. And then your study group. Oh, go ahead. Oh, somebody came on and they left. Uh-oh. And then on your study groups, how's everybody doing with your study groups? Some really neat stuff I see out there. So thank you for those that are able to get together with your groups. And I get a kick out of some of your meetings. They're fun to watch. So any questions on those? Everything going well?
I have one. Are you wanting us to post a link to the Hangout in the community forums?
Yeah, that's great if you do, because I do watch them.
Okay.
But I know some of the groups can't meet together, and so what I've encouraged them to do is just everybody contribute, you know, in some form or fashion, like create an agenda like you were going to meet, and somebody take one piece of the agenda and they contribute. So if it's only 2 that are meeting, or you all have to communicate via email, as long as you're meeting as a group, that's good. And those of you that can meet a group and create a hangout, please do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, your appeal. Let's see. It looks like the appeal starts. Have you guys already appealed exam 1? I haven't gotten in and looked at those yet. Have you appealed exam 1 yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
I mean, it's not open yet, but
yeah, it looks like it does open tonight.
And how the appeal works? We just
I'm sorry?
now I was wondering how the appeal works. We just have to redo it, or the questions we thought we write is wrong, or
I believe there's a tutorial on how to appeal the cases in either the first or second week. So you'll want to go through and look at those and just watch the video. And if you end up agreeing with all of them that you were wrong on, you'll still get 4 points.
Right.
I think it's for doing a dismissal or something like that. I can't remember the exact term, but
yeah. If I haven't gotten in and looked at the rubric for it, but you get points for each appeal, each question you appeal. Joe, did they give you a maximum? Do you remember?
I don't remember a maximum on it. I think you get 4 for doing the appeal, and you can get up to 4 for each question that you appeal. I don't know if there's a limit on how many you can appeal total, though.
In the past, there was not. At least I didn't put a limit on it. And so if you really struggled with the exam, you're really able to make up some good points. So I encourage you to appeal the exam. So if you have a question that you missed, I mean, you can certainly say, okay, I see where I missed this. You know, just kind of give you a rationale, but follow the tutorial, like Joe said. It's probably very similar to what we did in the past. But they're just trying to get you used to the appeal process. So you have to, if you're going to appeal a case, how are you doing that? So relate it to that. What you should have learned about the appeal process. So the appeal process is not reopening a claim. What are you doing in an appeal process? You remember?
Yeah, when it goes to appeals, the appellate court reviews the procedure of the lower court to make sure they followed all the rules.
Right. Spot on. Yeah, you're not going, even though when you look at the case, it looks like, I mean, it switched it because now the defendant is the plaintiff and switching roles, but it's not like you're resuing again. Like Susan said, they're going to review what was done and either affirm it or remand it back. So. Okay, so read the tutorial. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Any other questions before I ask somebody for a closing prayer? No? Okay. Could I get a volunteer for a closing prayer? Anybody step up?
All right, I will.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I really hope you guys enjoyed General Conference and all the words that were shared. I know I did. And thank you for the closing prayer.
Absolutely. Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so very grateful for this day and for this meeting, and we ask you to help us to be able to focus on our studies and also keep up with our lives. And we ask you to help us to retain what we have learned. Help us to make good choices and keep thy spirit close. And these things we ask for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I know it's late for you, but I enjoy being with you and the opportunity to talk with you. And please take a look at the questions that I posed so that you can take an opportunity to present on the topic. And Brett and Elvis, thank you for your participation in that tonight. I appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Oh, you too.